Ethan Parker stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the message from his uncle. The words were simple, almost casual, yet they carried a weight that made his chest tighten. Want to join me and Liam for a weekend road trip? Could be fun. Ethan knew exactly who Liam Foster was, his uncle's friend, someone whose presence always seemed larger than life. Tall, confident, effortlessly charming, with a grin that made Ethan feel both annoyed and inexplicably flustered. And yet, he had never imagined himself spending an entire weekend alone with him. Ethan paced his small apartment, the late afternoon sun casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. He tried to rationalize it. It's just a road trip. Just a few days of driving, sightseeing, and maybe awkward conversations. But beneath that rationality, an undercurrent of curiosity gnawed at him. He wasn't usually impulsive, far from it, but there was something about Liam's energy that intrigued him, something that made Ethan feel awake in ways he rarely did. That he remembered the first time he had met Liam at his uncle's barbecue. Liam had laughed at one of Ethan's jokes, really laughed, in a way that made the younger man's chest ache with a strange warmth. Since then, whenever Liam was around, Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and tension that he couldn't quite name. Now, staring at the invitation on his phone, those feelings bubbled up with renewed intensity. Ethan's apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. He considered calling his uncle to ask more questions but decided against it. Part of him wanted to experience this on his own terms, to see where the road might lead without anyone else's interference. The more he thought about it, the more the idea felt like a challenge, not dangerous, but exhilarating in a way that made his pulse quicken. By evening, Ethan had made up his mind. He packed a small bag with essentials, a few changes of clothes, toiletries, his notebook, and a camera. The act of packing felt almost ceremonial, a ritual to prepare for an adventure he wasn't entirely sure he wanted but couldn't resist. As he zipped the bag, his mind wandered to Liam. He tried to focus on the mundane, what stops they might make, the playlists they could share, but every mental scenario included Liam's presence, his laughter, the subtle ways he leaned in when talking, or the way his eyes seemed to linger just a little too long. The drive to meet Liam and his uncle was short but tense. Ethan rehearsed casual conversation in his head, but he knew it would all crumble under Liam's effortless charm. When he arrived at the designated coffee shop, Liam was already there, leaning against the car with a grin that immediately made Ethan forget all his rehearsed lines. "Hey, Ethan," Liam said, voice smooth, carrying an ease that made Ethan's nerves knot and unknot in the same instant. "Glad you decided to come." "Yeah," Ethan managed, his voice sounding too small even to his own ears. "Thought it could be fun." Liam's grin widened. "Fun's one word for it. Adventure's another." Ethan tried to steady himself as he climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled faintly of leather and citrus, Liam's signature combination. The first few miles were quiet, filled with the occasional hum of the engine and the soft playlist Liam had chosen, a mix of old classics and new hits. Ethan stole glances at him, noticing the way he tapped the steering wheel in time with the music, the way his jaw flexed when he laughed at something only he seemed to hear. "So, Ethan," Liam began, breaking the silence. "Have you done many trips like this?" Ethan shook his head. "Not really. Mostly short drives, nothing like this." He gestured vaguely toward the open road ahead, trying to sound casual. Liam's eyes met his briefly, sharp and calculating, then softened. "Good. Then this will be new for both of us." The way Liam said it made Ethan's stomach twist. There was a subtle suggestion there, something unspoken, and Ethan felt both alarmed and excited by it. He couldn't tell if it was intentional or if his own mind was reading too much into the way Liam's gaze lingered on him. As the hours passed, the conversation shifted from small talk to more personal topics. Liam was surprisingly open, sharing stories from his travels, his work, and even snippets of childhood memories. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in weeks, caught in the pull of Liam's charisma. And yet, every laugh, every shared anecdote carried an undertone of something more, a quiet tension beneath the surface that Ethan couldn't quite define. The scenery changed from urban streets to rolling hills, then to stretches of open highway flanked by forests and lakes. Ethan pressed his face against the window, letting the wind tousle his hair, trying to focus on the passing landscape, on the way the sun reflected off the water, on the smell of pine in the air. But no matter how hard he tried, his attention kept drifting back to Liam. By the time they stopped for a late lunch at a small diner off the main road, the subtle tension had grown more palpable. They sat in a corner booth, the hum of other diners fading into the background. Liam's hand brushed against Ethan's as they reached for the same menu, and Ethan felt a spark that made his chest constrict. He looked up, meeting Liam's eyes, and for a brief moment, words failed him. Liam's expression was unreadable, a mix of amusement and something softer, more intimate. Ethan forced himself to speak. "I guess, this isn't awkward." "Awkward?" Liam echoed, leaning back with that effortless grin. "Not at all." "Comfortable?" "Maybe a little more than usual." The comment lingered, teasing and charged. Ethan smiled, but inside, he felt a fluttering unease. He wasn't sure if it was excitement, fear, or desire, or a mixture of all three. That they finished lunch, paid the bill, and returned to the car. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the road. As they drove on, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this trip was about to change something, about him, about Liam, and about the invisible line that neither of them had yet acknowledged. The air was charged with possibility, tension, and an unspoken promise that the weekend ahead would not be ordinary, and as the car sped along the open highway, Ethan realized he was both terrified and exhilarated by the thought. The evening air had cooled by the time Ethan and Liam arrived at the small cabin Liam had booked for the weekend. Nestled on the edge of a forested ridge, the cabin overlooked a glassy lake reflecting the orange and pink hues of sunset. Ethan stepped out of the car, stretching, and took in the scenery. It was breathtaking, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Liam. The way he moved, the casual confidence in every gesture, the faint scent of cedar and cologne that clung to him, it all stirred something Ethan didn't fully understand yet. Liam handed him a duffel bag with an easy smile. "Don't let me carry everything," he said, voice smooth, almost teasing. Ethan took it, noting the brush of Liam's fingers against his own. His pulse quickened. He told himself it was just contact, nothing more, yet the tension it created between them was palpable. Inside, the cabin was rustic but cozy, wooden beams, a small stone fireplace, and a single couch that faced the window overlooking the lake. Liam moved with an effortless grace, unpacking his bag, setting things in order as if he had done this 100 times before. Ethan, in contrast, felt slightly clumsy, self-conscious under Liam's gaze. They sat on the couch, both nursing cups of steaming coffee. The conversation started casually, movies, travel experiences, favorite books, but there was an unspoken undercurrent. Ethan noticed the way Liam's eyes seemed to linger, scanning him in a way that made him suddenly aware of his own posture, the tilt of his head, the way his hands rested on his knees. "You ever think about how a single weekend can change everything?" Liam asked suddenly, looking out the window as if searching for the right words in the fading light. Ethan tilted his head, unsure how to respond. "Sometimes. I guess it depends on the weekend." Liam's lips curved into that knowing smile that had haunted Ethan's thoughts for weeks. "Depends on who you spend it with, maybe." The words lingered in the air, heavy and charged. Ethan felt a flutter in his chest, a mix of excitement and unease. He didn't know whether to laugh, to shift in his seat, or to leave. Instead, he just looked at Liam, trying to read the intent behind the smile. There was amusement, yes, but something deeper, something warmer, something that felt dangerously personal. They decided to take a walk along the lakeshore before dinner. The path was narrow, flanked by dense trees, and the silence between them was comfortable yet loaded with anticipation. Ethan found himself walking closer to Liam than strictly necessary, drawn to the subtle warmth of his presence. Liam seemed to notice, glancing at him from the corner of his eye with a slight, playful smirk. "You're quiet," Liam observed. "Thinking too much?" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I just notice things." "Notice me?" Liam asked, stepping just slightly closer, though not enough to be overt. The proximity made Ethan's heart pound. He wasn't sure if it was excitement, fear, or desire, or an intricate combination of all three that the conversation drifted into personal territory, childhood memories, regrets, and dreams. Liam spoke openly, sharing moments of vulnerability that contrasted with the confident exterior he always presented. Ethan listened, intrigued, sensing a rare honesty beneath the charm. He felt a connection he hadn't anticipated, an emotional intimacy that complicated the attraction simmering beneath the surface. By the time they returned to the cabin, twilight had deepened into night. The fireplace crackled as Liam prepared a simple dinner, the aroma of grilled vegetables and seasoned chicken filling the room. Ethan tried to focus on the meal, but every glance at Liam reminded him of the charged energy lingering between them. Every movement Liam made seemed to draw Ethan's attention in a way that felt both thrilling and unsettling. After dinner, they sat near the fire, the room dimly lit, the lake outside now a dark mirror of the starlit sky. Liam leaned back on the couch, relaxed, yet every so often his gaze flicked toward Ethan. Their knees brushed accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, sending sparks of awareness through Ethan's body. He forced himself to focus on the fire, counting the crackles, the flicker of light on the walls, anything to calm the heat rising inside him. "You've changed a lot since I last saw you," Liam said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just physically. I mean, you carry yourself differently. More aware." Ethan swallowed. "Aware of what?" "Of yourself," Liam replied, eyes steady on his face. "Of what you want, even if you're not ready to admit it." Ethan felt a shiver run through him. The word struck too close to home. He opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find anything that wouldn't betray his inner turmoil. Instead, he looked down at his hands, twisting them nervously. The night deepened. The lake outside was now a dark expanse, reflecting only moonlight. The quiet was punctuated by distant animal calls and the soft crackle of the fire. Liam shifted slightly, moving closer, just enough that Ethan could feel the warmth radiating from him. The tension was electric, unspoken, yet impossible to ignore. Ethan's mind raced, oscillating between guilt, fear, and a longing he didn't fully understand. As the fire dwindled to embers, Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what this is." Liam smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made Ethan's heart clench. "Neither do I. But that's what makes it interesting, isn't it?" Ethan wanted to argue, to deny the pull he felt, yet he found himself nodding slightly. The admission alone carried weight, a fragile acknowledgement of the tension building between them. He realized this weekend was no longer just a trip, it had become a test, a maze of desire, restraint, and moral boundaries. The room was silent after that, save for the occasional pop from the dying fire. Ethan couldn't tell if Liam had moved closer or if his own imagination was at play, but the proximity was undeniable. The air between them hummed with possibility, uncertainty, and temptation. As Ethan climbed the narrow staircase to the small loft where he would sleep, he felt an unfamiliar restlessness. His thoughts were a jumble of attraction, guilt, and anticipation. Liam's words echoed in his mind, "That's what makes it interesting, isn't it?" Lying on the bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the moonlight dancing across the wooden beams. He knew the weekend ahead would not be simple. The road was open, the possibilities endless, and the line between curiosity and temptation perilously thin. And for the first time in a long while, he wondered what it would mean if he crossed it. The morning sun broke through the tent's thin fabric, casting a warm, golden glow across Ethan's sleeping bag. The sounds of the forest were sharper now, birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant trickle of the stream near their campsite. Ethan stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from the previous day's hike, and listened to the quiet, comforting rhythm of the outdoors. But the peace was undercut by a flutter of anticipation. Malik was awake somewhere nearby, and the thought of him, the curve of his smile, the steady confidence in his movements, made Ethan's chest tighten with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They met outside the tent for breakfast, a simple affair of granola bars, trail mix, and hot coffee brewed over a small camping stove. Malik's presence was magnetic, even in the most mundane actions, pouring coffee, breaking a granola bar in half, he carried a charm that drew Ethan's attention. The conversation started lightly, but it didn't take long for their discussion to slip into personal territory. Malik spoke about his experiences traveling through Europe, the small towns he'd visited, and the people he'd met along the way. Ethan found himself sharing stories he had never told Clara, tales of spontaneous decisions, of minor rebellions against the monotony of his life. As they packed their gear for the day's hike, Malik's hand brushed against Ethan's on multiple occasions, each contact fleeting yet electric. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken, a mixture of thrill and guilt he could not immediately place. He reminded himself that this was an adventure, nothing more. But the way Malik looked at him, directly, unflinchingly, with a curiosity that mirrored his own, made such rationalizations difficult. Every glance carried weight, every smile seemed to linger, and the air between them was charged with unspoken possibilities. The trail was steeper today, winding upward through dense pine and rocky outcrops. Ethan struggled at times, his muscles complaining, but Malik matched him stride for stride, offering words of encouragement and subtle guidance. "Careful here," Malik said softly as Ethan navigated a tricky incline, his hand brushing against Ethan's for balance. The touch was accidental, or so Ethan told himself, yet it left a warmth lingering long after they had moved apart. Each small interaction, the shared laughter, the side glances, the supportive gestures, built an intimacy that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. Around midday, they paused at a high ledge that overlooked a valley bathed in sunlight. Ethan leaned against a boulder, catching his breath, and looked out over the vast expanse of green forests and distant peaks. Malik settled beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "It's incredible up here," Malik murmured, voice soft, almost intimate. Ethan nodded, aware of the closeness, aware of how Malik's presence seemed to occupy space in a way that went beyond physical proximity. Their conversation turned personal again, flowing effortlessly. Malik asked about Ethan's childhood, his dreams, and his disappointments, and Ethan found himself answering with a vulnerability he had rarely allowed. There was a trust between them that felt instantaneous, built on shared time and an unspoken understanding. Malik, in turn, shared anecdotes about his own life, moments of failure, moments of triumph, and the quiet loneliness that often accompanied success. Ethan listened, captivated, feeling a connection that went deeper than friendship, yet terrified by the implications. By late afternoon, they had reached a small waterfall cascading into a clear pool, an idyllic spot for a brief rest. Ethan dipped his hand into the cool water, watching Malik do the same. The simple act of sharing a moment of silence, of being together in such a serene place, was laden with tension. Malik's gaze lingered on Ethan, and for the first time, Ethan noticed the intensity in his eyes, not just friendly interest, but something more intimate, more personal. The awareness hit him like a physical jolt, and he shifted slightly, trying to appear casual while his heart raced. The descent back to camp was quieter, each man lost in thought. Ethan replayed their interactions, analyzing every brush of a hand, every lingering look. His mind felt like a storm, the thrill of connection clashing with guilt and fear. He knew he was crossing invisible boundaries, treading into territory that could not be easily navigated. Malik, sensing the tension, spoke little, letting the silence speak for them both. And yet, in that silence, a language formed, one of desire, curiosity, and the tentative beginnings of something forbidden. Back at the campsite, they decided to prepare a simple dinner over the fire. The flames crackled and cast flickering shadows across their faces. Malik handed Ethan a skewer of vegetables, their fingers brushing once again. Ethan felt a shiver run through him, a confusing mix of thrill and caution. They ate in companionable silence at first, then conversation emerged, delicate and probing, testing the waters of their connection. Malik's laughter was soft but direct, filling the night air with warmth. Ethan realized, with both excitement and trepidation, that he had never felt this kind of comfort, this kind of magnetic pull, with anyone before. As darkness deepened, they sat by the dying embers of the fire, the world around them muted except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Malik spoke in a low, reflective tone about the solitude of the mountains, about how being away from the distractions of life forced people to confront themselves. Ethan listened, absorbing the weight of his words, feeling a mirror of his own thoughts and fears. The conversation turned toward dreams, hopes for the future, desires never voiced, and the silent acknowledgement of paths not taken. Ethan realized that this weekend was no longer simply an adventure, it had become a mirror reflecting his own inner yearnings. Malik's presence was intoxicating, and each moment spent together heightened his awareness of emotions he had kept buried. As the fire dwindled, they both fell into a companionable quiet, side by side, neither rushing to speak. The unspoken tension, the subtle acknowledgement of feelings, hung in the air like a delicate mist, invisible yet undeniably present. Lying in his sleeping bag that night, Ethan replayed the day in fragments, the accidental touches, the shared laughter, the intensity of Malik's gaze. He knew that he was walking a delicate line between curiosity and temptation, between the comfort of routine and the thrill of something new and forbidden. And as sleep began to take him, his mind whispered the undeniable truth: this was more than a hike. This was the beginning of an emotional journey, one that could change everything he thought he knew about desire, loyalty, and himself. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan understood that the real test of this adventure had only just begun.